In 1985, an employee noticed a toddler wandering around their store completely alone. Authorities later tried to question the young girl, and she replied with a simple yet ominous statement: "Mommy is in the trees." The girl was placed in the care of her grandmother while a massive search began. Despite this, nobody would find either of the toddler's parents until a couple of months later. A man was walking his dog deep in the woods when he spotted an abandoned truck and a dead body. The body was confirmed to be the toddler's mother, Diana Robertson. She was stabbed 17 times and left with a tube sock tied around her neck. The front seats of the truck were stained with blood, and an envelope was left on the dash that read, "I love you, Diana." The truck belonged to her boyfriend, Mike Reamer, yet he was nowhere to be found. Police soon realized that just 4 months earlier, a couple was found dead 15 miles from where they found Diana. To make matters even stranger, one of the victims was also found with a tube sock tied around her neck with the same exact knot. This led the police to form two theories. The first was that a local serial killer was behind both cases and just hid Mike Reamer's body. The second, but less popular theory, was that Reamer was a serial killer himself. However, 25 years later, Reamer's skull was found about a mile from the site of Diana's murder. The rest of his body was never found, leaving police clueless on his cause of death. What transpired that day in 1985 remains unknown.
There's a reason why it's taken me this long to do this case. It's morbid. Think about the worst thing that you can imagine happening to a human being, times that by 100, and that's this case. Junko Furuta, this happened in Japan in 1988. If you've ever seen her name in my comments, every single person that talks about it says this is the worst case they've ever heard of. It is. It's not going to be for everyone. It's very graphic. It's heavy to listen to. If you think you're not ready for that, then please don't watch it. Junko Furuta was a 17-year-old girl that was kidnapped and tortured for 44 days straight by 4 boys. This case is often referred to as the 44 Days of Hell. Junko was a beautiful girl. Again, she was only 17 years old. She was a high school student and did work a part-time job. She had also accepted a job offer to work after graduating high school. She lived at home with her mom, dad, and 2 brothers. She was described as a great girl with big dreams. She was well liked by every single person she met. She had a good head on her shoulders and was very, very loved. November 25th, 1988, Junko had just finished working a shift at her part-time job and she was going to be riding her bike back home. She was riding her bike when all of a sudden a boy her age jumped out of nowhere, kicked her off her bike, and then ran away. There was another boy, Hiroshi Miyano. He was 18 years old. He was walking nearby and he saw this happen, so he immediately ran over to Junko, offered to help her, and walk with her the rest of the way home. Junko recognizes Hiroshi because he went to her school, so she thinks, awesome, great, thank you so much, and they start walking towards her house. She's slowly letting her guard down, and Hiroshi is leading the way until they make their way to an abandoned warehouse. As soon as they get to the warehouse, Hiroshi's entire demeanor changes. He starts yelling at Junko, saying that she is to do what he says, tells her that he has connections to a very big, dangerous group of people, and that if she disobeys what he says, he's gonna get the group to kill her. Hiroshi then forces Junko to go inside the abandoned warehouse, where he then proceeds to SA her. He then calls a taxi to a hotel, and he does the same thing to her again 2 more times. Junko, I imagine, was probably 1, in so much fear, but also 2, so confused as to why anyone was doing this to her. A classmate, out of all people, a person that she knew. It has been said that sometime in the past, Hiroshi expressed to Junko that he had feelings for her and she politely rejected him, which is what some people believe to be his motive behind all of this. Because of the kind of guy that he was, I guess he was kind of popular. When he felt rejection, that caused him to create so much hate and anger towards Junko. Back at the hotel, Hiroshi calls some of his friends, and you would think that he would call them and be like, I up, but instead he called them to brag about it as if he was proud of it. His friends, unbelievably so, were excited about this. They told him to not let go of Junko, to keep her hostage so that they can do the same thing to her that he had just done. At 3 in the morning, Hiroshi takes Junko to a park where they would meet up with 3 of his friends. Joe was 17 years old, Shinhee was 16, and Yuyushi was 17. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. We all know I'm not good at pronouncing. When the friends showed up, it was at that point that Junko realized that Shinhee was the one that had kicked her off her bike that day. So that whole thing had been planned for Hiroshi to come in, act like a hero, and in reality, that's what was supposed to happen all along. The 4 boys had dropped out of high school that summer of 1988. They got involved with a group of people committing organized crimes including theft and SA. We later find out that that little group of boys had done this before. Earlier that month, before they kidnapped Junko, they had done this to a different girl, tricked her into trusting them, SA'd her, and then let her go a few hours later. The boys tell Junko that they're going to be going back to Hiroshi's house, where he lives at with his parents, and they tell her that if the parents ask, she has to pretend to be one of their girlfriends. Back at Junko's house, her whole family is extremely concerned. They had reported her missing, and there was a whole investigation looking for her. However, because the boys did not want to get caught, they forced Junko to call her family and say that she ran away because she wanted to, and that she was safe with other friends and did not want to be found. After that, all search parties were called off. Junko would now be held for the next month and a half in what was truly a living nightmare. She would be kept and hidden in a bedroom on the second floor of the house, where she would be starved. She was forced to eat insects, cockroaches, bugs, and her own feces and urine, and she had to do that because that was the only thing that she had to fuel her to try and survive this. Now I'm gonna go more into detail about some of the things they did to her if you don't want to listen, because it truly is so disturbing and so morbid. Skip ahead a little bit. Junko was brutally beaten. She would be hung up and used as a punching bag for the boys to punch as hard as they could. She would be laid on the ground for the boys to step on and jump all over her head. She would be SA'd multiple times a day, and they would invite other friends, other horrible people to come and do the same thing to Junko that they were doing. They invited 2 guys most often to use Junko, but it is believed that over the course of her time there, she was SA'd over 400 times by 100 different people. They would insert foreign objects in places they should never be, if you get what I'm saying. The damage was so bad that it damaged a lot of her internal organs. Some of the objects that they would force through inside her mouth and different places would be fireworks that they would light in her. They ripped off part of her eyelids. They ripped off one of her using pliers, and she was never allowed to be clothed. They would force her to be undressed, even when they forced and locked her out in the balcony to sleep outside in the middle of winter, mind you. And that's not even scratching the surface on the things they did to her. It was so bad that Junko would beg them to please just kill her and end it all. One of the times when the 2 guys that would often go there left and went back home, one of the guys started to feel guilty for what he did. He felt so guilty that he ended up telling his brother everything, who then told his parents, who then told the police. The police are now informed of these horrific actions that are happening to a girl that's being held hostage, so they go to Hiroshi's house to see what's going on. Hiroshi's parents answered the door, and they said that there was no girl in there. They didn't know what they were talking about. They even offered to let the police go inside and check it out because there was no girl there. This is so infuriating because the police were offered to come inside. In their head, they thought, well, obviously there's no girl there. They would not have offered for us to come inside if there was something really going on, so it must be fine. And they decided to not go inside. They just left. Hiroshi's parents also later claimed that they didn't really know what was going on because apparently they had a vacation house that they would go to often. But really, it's your house. You were there. You were present. You knew what was happening. That's at least my opinion, but... A few weeks into being held captive, by some miracle, Junko was still alive, and she managed to sneak away long enough to find a phone. She was about to call the police, but right before she could, Hiroshi saw her, ripped the phone out of her hands. To punish her, he doused her legs in lighter fluid and set them on fire. As time went on, because Junko was in such bad shape, she was barely recognizable, the boys lost attraction to her. They decided that they needed to go out and look for a girl that they were attracted to. So they did. They abducted a 19-year-old girl when she was on her way home from work and SA'd her. He then left her there and went back to the house. January 4th, 1989, the boys challenged Junko to play a game. Because she was so weak, they were not expecting her to do well, but Junko won the game. Even in the worst imaginable condition, Junko was still smarter than those stupid little 4 boys, even if the only way that she could show it was a game, but still, she won. As I'm sure you can guess, that infuriated the boys. They were so angry that she won the game, they started beating her, burning her with hot wax. When she physically could not bear it anymore, she collapsed and started having a seizure. The boys thought that she was faking, so they poured more lighter fluid all over her and lit her on fire again. She eventually became unresponsive, and at 10 in the morning, Junko Furuta passed away. After 44 days of torture, her body just gave up and she lost her fight. I guess the boys thought that she was just unresponsive and not really dead because she had passed out in the past before, so they didn't realize that she had died until after 24 hours later later, which is when Hiroshi called his brother to ask for help to dispose of the body. The idea they came up with was to put her body in a blanket, put it in a large travel bag, and then put that in a metal drum and fill it with wet concrete. They then waited for the concrete to set, drove to a nearby landfill, and dropped it in there. And guys, nobody was looking for Junko because they thought that she did run away on her own accord and that she was safe and that she was with her friends and really did not want to be found. So isn't that crazy to think that the boys were this close to getting away with it? But I'm so glad to say that they don't. 3 weeks later, Hiroshi and Joe are arrested for SA of that 19-year-old girl. The girl that they had done that to in the middle of when Junko was being held hostage. They get arrested and they get brought in for questioning. During this time, in that same area, there was an unsolved murder of a mom and her son. So the cops started thinking, we have these two guys that did this to the 19-year-old girl. Could they also have been involved in the murder? Which that murder, to clarify, had nothing to do with Junko. But in the time that the boys were being questioned, the cops kind of hinted at the fact that they knew that they had possibly something to do with a murder. Hiroshi thought in his head they know about Junko, although they obviously didn't, but he's thinking, if I'm the first one to confess and I tell the cops everything, then maybe I will get in less trouble. So he confessed, telling the cops everything about Junko, what they had done to her, leaving police officers absolutely shocked. He told them about where they dumped her body. They went to go check it out. It was there, confirming that his whole story was true. And all boys were finally arrested. Because they did not want to plead guilty to murder, they accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to committing bodily injury that resulted in death. Because all of the boys were under the age of 18, their sentences are gonna make you angry. Hiroshi was originally sentenced to 17 years in prison. He tried to appeal it because he thought that that was too long, and the judge actually said, you know what, that's not enough, and he resentenced him to 20 years. He was released in 2009, and he has then changed his name. Joe, and I know I'm not saying the name correctly, I'm sorry. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison, so he was released in 1999, but in 2004, he was arrested again, spent more time in prison, and was released in 2009. Shinhee was originally sentenced to 5 to 6 years in prison, but he was resentenced to 5 to 9 years, so he was released in 1998. Yuyushi was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison and was resentenced to 5 to 7 years. He was released in 1996. Absolutely horrific. I wish I was lying. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. I've seen this picture circling around social media. I've been tagged in one too many posts. I was tagged again last night by you know who you are. At first glance, I saw the picture. Don't know what's going on in the picture, but I thought it's none of my business. Unfortunately for me, and now probably unfortunately for you, I looked it up. And now we have to talk about it. Dylan Redwine was born in 1999, and that has a little bit of a soft spot for me because I was born in 99, so he would have been my age. But unfortunately, his life was taken at the age of 13 at the hands of his own father in November 2012 in Colorado. Redwine family was made up of the mother Elaine, the dad Mark Redwine, the older brother Corey, and little brother Dylan. Dylan also had 2 half-siblings from the father's previous marriage. Dylan and Corey were really close. They had a really good relationship. Corey was someone that Dylan could look up to. Good role model, but also a good friend. Dylan has been described as a happy boy that loved to play baseball and hang out with his friends. After being together for 18 years, Elaine and Mark, the parents, decide to get a divorce in 2005. The divorce was messy. It was tough not only on the parents but on the kids. Dylan and Corey live with the mom full time. They do visit Mark on occasion because he did have visitation rights. The boys did not have a good relationship with the dad. I think it was because the divorce was so messy and they didn't like the way that Mark was treating their mom. They were far, far away from any sort of fatherly son relationship. In June of 2011, Dylan is 13 at the time, Corey is 18. They go on a road trip with their father Mark. On this trip, Dylan was on his dad's laptop and he found some very disturbing images. Dylan takes the laptop and he sneaks over to the bathroom and signals Corey to go inside. So he goes inside, they lock the door. Dylan is going to show Corey the images that he found. So he does. And these images, I mean, they made me gag. The pictures are of the father. He is wearing makeup, he's wearing a wig and a red bra, and he is eating what is human feces out of a diaper. Yeah. You heard me right. Corey, the older brother, takes out his phone, takes pictures of the laptop, and then the boys put the laptop back, put everything back, and just go to sleep. Ever since seeing those pictures, that obviously created more distance between the boys and the dad. They were weirded out. They thought it was disgusting, and they wanted nothing to do with it. So Dylan is still living with his mom and Corey in Colorado Springs, but November 2012, he has to go stay with his dad for Thanksgiving. It's a court order. He doesn't want to at all, but he kind of has no choice. November 18th, Dylan takes a flight to go see his dad dad in Durango, Colorado. When he lands, he texts his mom that he's landed with a sad face, and his mom responds that she's really proud of him and says, "I miss you already, but try and have fun." The very next day, November 19th, Elaine is at work. She gets a text from Mark asking if she knows where Dylan is. But Dylan was supposed to be staying with the dad, so why is he asking Elaine? Mark had gone to the police station to let them know that he couldn't find his son. His story was that he arrived the night prior, asked if he could go sleep over at a friend's house. He said no, so Dylan just made plans to go over to his friend's house the next morning. The next morning, Mark had to run errands. Dylan slept in, so Mark just went by himself. Phone records show that Mark was texting and calling Dylan all day. Dylan never responded. Mark says he then returns home, takes a nap, wakes up, and Dylan still isn't home. Elaine is concerned. She immediately packs up the car and makes the drive from Colorado Springs to Durango with Dylan's older brother Corey and her new husband Michael. On the drive there, she texts Dylan and says, "Dylan, please be safe. Mom is here to come and get you." Remember how I said that Mark had been married prior? So the day that Dylan goes missing, the ex-wife calls the police station. She tells them about her relationship with Mark and how he was abusive. She mentions that one time in an argument, he mentioned that he would kill their kids because they had kids together as well. She also mentioned how in a different conversation one time when they were camping, he told her that if he ever needed to hide a body, he would hide it in the mountains. So the ex-wife was somewhat suspicious of Mark, but she wasn't the only one. Cody and Elaine were also very suspicious of Mark. Tensions are high. It's an incredibly high-stress situation, but the main priority remains to find Dylan. Where is Dylan? Corey decides that he needs to fill the mom in on everything, paint the full picture for her, so he tells her about the pictures that him and Dylan found. He says that a month prior, in the middle of a texting argument between him and his father Mark, he told him that they had seen the pictures. He confronted him, said that Dylan had seen them too. So this now kind of switches the narrative from a child is missing, he probably just ran away, to a child is missing and the last person that saw him could potentially be a very dangerous person. As soon as Elaine, Corey, and Michael get to Durango, they go to the police station and then they start searching for hours throughout the night. On the other hand, Mark is at home sleeping. Throughout the following days, investigators go to Mark's house to speak to him, even though for whatever reason he denied filing an actual report. He wouldn't for some reason. Obviously, he still had to communicate with them because his child is missing and he was the last person that saw him. When they go to his house, immediately his behavior weird, strange, odd. He's not concerned, not alarmed, absolutely has no care in the world. At the house, none of Dylan's belongings are found. Phone charger, backpack, phone, all gone. The only thing that's there that could have a trace of Dylan was the pillowcase that he slept on. Searches have started to form. Mark to live really close to a national park with a lot of mountains, so investigators were doing their best to find anything helpful, but days went by with nothing. By November 29th, authorities have a search warrant, so they go to search Mark's home. 6 pieces of evidence were taken from the house that had a positive reaction to luminol, meaning they had traces of blood. They were all in the living room, most of them. 5 out of the 6 were on the couch, on the carpet, on the love seat, coffee table, and underneath the rug. February 2013, Mark does an interview where he talks about Dylan. More specifically, he talks about this beautiful relationship that they had. He says they were really close. He specifically said, "We were inseparable. Wherever I was, he was right besides me," which couldn't be farther from the truth. Mark also mentions that because him and Dylan were so close, the mom, Elaine, was very jealous because they had a bond that him and the mom could never have. So that was apparently a big problem to her, which again is a lie. February 26 and 27, Mark goes on the Dr. Phil show. I assume his intentions were to go on to clear his name. However, Elaine and Corey also go on the show. Mark and Elaine were not agreeing on anything. It was pretty obvious that they didn't get along. They were arguing pretty much. Corey flat out says that he thinks that Mark is responsible for his little brother's death. Mark is just holding on to his innocence. June 27th, 2013, on a road near the mountains near where Mark lived, a pair of headphones were found that matched Dylan's, a piece of clothing was found that matched Dylan's, a single shoe, and a sock also found that also matched Dylan's. Then, finally, partial human remains were found, tested the DNA, and were able to confirm that those remains were those of Dylan Redwine. November 1st, 2015, almost 3 years later, a hiker in the area is hiking when he runs into a human skull around 1.5 miles away from where the other human remains were found. That skull was confirmed to be Dylan's as well, and the skull had very visible blunt force trauma. Above the left eye, there was a fracture that was a little bit over 4 inches long. The cause of death was officially changed from undetermined to a homicide. And also, finally, Mark is officially named a person of interest. July 22nd, 2017, Mark is arrested in connection to Dylan's death and given a $1 million cash bond. He is charged with suspicion of second-degree murder and child assaulting and death. The indictment stated that his motive were those pictures, that Dylan had seen the pictures, he was planning on confronting his father about him, and that ended in a violent response for Mark that ended in Dylan's death. The trial kept getting pushed back. It was actually rescheduled 10 times. June 21st, 2001, the trial began. Mark pled not guilty. His defense was saying that Dylan ran away and that he was killed by an animal in the wildlife, which is honestly silly. What prosecutors believed happened was that Mark killed Dylan in his living room, decapitated him, and then got rid of his remains in the woods. They brought up the blood in the living room. They also mentioned how cadaver dogs had picked up the scent of human remains on Mark's clothing, in the back of his car in the trunk, as well as in the living room. Elaine testified, Corey testified. Those were very sad and hard to watch. Corey talked about the day that they found the pictures, and he said that that day Dylan lost any reason to look up to Mark. July 16th, 2021, Mark Redwine was found guilty of second-degree murder and child. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison.
Do not watch this video if you're home alone. When news of a serial killer on the loose spread, people were desperately calling the local security man to install security alarms on their homes. Little did they know, he was the killer. In January 1974, 4 members of the Otero family were murdered in Kansas. Their bodies were tragically discovered by the 3 older children who had been at school during the time of the murders. The killer took his next victims just months after this. He stalked and waited outside the home of young college student Catherine Bright. When she arrived home, he stabbed her and strangled her. He then shot her brother Kevin twice, but miraculously he survived. Kevin described the killer as having psychotic eyes. Intending to torment the local community, the mystery killer wrote a letter describing his killings. He left this in the public library and called a local paper to tell them where to find it. He stated he would kill again and named himself BTK, and no one knew what BTK stood for. He struck again in 1977. His 7th victim, Shirley Vian, was SA'd and killed while her 6-year-old son watched through the keyhole of the door. Now, shockingly, BTK at this point kept a sealed treasure chest of horrors at his family home. This is where he lived with his wife and children. It contained sick mementos from the crime scenes, including victims' underwear, driver's licenses, and pictures of him dressed up in the victims' underwear and reenacting the ways in which he'd killed them. Little did his family know that BTK, or Dennis Rader, was living a double life. His daughter described him as a strict Christian, and he helps keep the local community safe by installing security alarms on their houses. Now, business was booming as many vulnerable women contacted him to come and install security alarms on their homes amid the news of the BTK killer. When a neighbour was then killed by the BTK, Dennis reassured his family that they were safe. In actual fact, it was Dennis who had murdered the woman, 53-year-old Maureen Hedge, the night before. She was tied up and choked. In 1986, he killed his 9th victim, 28-year-old Vicky Wagirl, while her 2-year-old was in the playpen. In 1991, he committed his 10th and final crime. He broke into the home of 62-year-old grandmother Dolores Davis and killed her. He then dumped her body by a bridge. The panic died down and BTK wanted attention. It was now 2004 and he decided to send taunting letters to the media and police. He was actually caught by a letter he sent via floppy disk. Inside, police found data of a deleted file, and it was a document for the church. It was written by the church council president, Dennis Rader. A positive DNA match was found for Dennis under a victim's fingernails. He took pleasure in revealing that BTK stood for bind, torture, and kill. He also confessed to all of the murders. He was sentenced to 175 years in jail without the possibility of parole.
June 10th, 1994, a 13-year-old boy, Nicholas Barkley, disappeared without a trace in San Antonio, Texas. He went to go play basketball with his friends, never came home. Nicholas was raised by a single mom. They lived in a trailer park. Sweet boy, but definitely had an attitude. The older that he got, the sassier that he got. By the time that he was 13, he'd gotten in trouble with the law. Definitely a little bit of a rebel, and the police would often go to their home because of arguments between Nicholas and his mom. Nicholas also has a half-brother named Jason. So the day that he goes missing, he goes to a nearby court to play basketball with his friends. He needs a ride home. He calls home. The mom is sleeping, so Jason answers the phone. He's like, you know what, mom's already asleep, just walk home. It was around 1.5 miles away. He never makes it home, but because he had been rebelling a little bit, the family doesn't freak out at first, so they don't report him missing until after 3 days. Weeks pass without any leads, any information, any signs of where Nicholas could have gone, but the police are still in contact with the family because they're still getting called to go out to the house because Jason and the mother frequently have arguments. 3 months after Nicholas is missing, Jason, the half-brother, calls the police and says that Nicholas stopped by. He saw him trying to break into the garage, and when Jason went out there to go get him, Nicholas ran away. That call from Jason to the police was the only sighting of Nicholas since he went missing, the only lead, I guess, that they had. 3 years go by, and on October 7th, 1997, the police get a call from authorities 5,000 miles away in Spain. The authorities in Spain say that they got a call from a tourist couple, wife and a husband, saying that they found a young boy lost between 14 and 15 years old. He looked confused, he didn't have an ID, he didn't know who he was, and he was really scared. The police go to pick up the boy, they bring him to the station, they start asking him questions. He doesn't know anything, he seems really freaked out, he doesn't know his name, he doesn't know his parents, he doesn't even know where he's from. After questioning him for a little bit, the boy says that he is from America, but he can't remember where exactly he's from. He said that he had been kidnapped in America and forced into human in Europe, which is obviously a very serious statement. So the police feel really bad for this kid that's so confused and scared and lost, so they let him sleep in their offices for the night. A few hours later, someone from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children gets a call from the police station saying that they found a boy around 15 to 16 years old and that he doesn't know who he is. The police give the woman on the phone a description, and the woman is looking through files and says, oh, you know what, this kid is missing. He kind of looks like the guy that you're describing. Maybe his name is Nicholas Barkley. So the police ask the woman on the phone to fax over a picture. The picture gets there and it does look like it's Nicholas. So the police confirm that the boy that they have in their station is Nicholas. Immediately, the woman calls Nicholas' family in the United States and they say that they have found Nicholas and they need someone from his family to fly to Spain to confirm that it really is him. Nicholas's half-sister, her name is Carrie, she flies to Spain to confirm that it really is him and to bring him home. She gets to the U.S. Embassy. She immediately runs up to Nicholas, hugs him tight, touches his nose and says, I remember this nose. You look so much like Uncle Pat. And she notices that he seems really freaked out. He's not talking very much, being really quiet, but obviously he's been missing for years. So she just assumes that he probably went through something traumatic and just leaves it at that. After she hugs him, she pulls out a photo album to help him remember who his family is. And she starts pointing out all the people on the album. And it's like, this is mom, this is our uncle, this is our cousin, trying to get him to remember. So Carrie knew that it was Nicholas, but the Spanish government wouldn't let him leave the country until they had definite proof. She flew there and said it looked like him, but something about him was kind of off, so they decided they were going to do separate interviews with Carrie and Nicholas. In the interview with Nicholas, they show him pictures of 5 family members and they ask him to say who they are. He answers mostly all of them correctly, and then they pretty much just confirmed that he was a U.S. citizen and gave him a passport to fly back to Texas. When they land, his entire family is at the airport except for his half-brother Jason, and they're so excited to see him. Obviously, he's been missing. He's back now. They never expected him to come back. The mom says and notices that he's acting a little weird, but again, just justifies it by dealing with the fact that he was probably in a really traumatic situation and he's getting overwhelmed with seeing everyone again for the first time in years, so she lets it go. He then ends up moving in with Carrie, her whole family. She has a husband and kids, and he's being very strange, very distant. And the reason why he's being like that is because he's not really Nicholas. The person living with Carrie, with her husband, with her children, is not Nicholas. He's actually a French man who is 23 years old, not 16, and his name is Frederick Borden. I think that's how you say his last name. You may be wondering, how did he pull it off? I'll tell you. The night that he was found, he slept at the police station, because the cops felt really bad for him. He's supposed to be sleeping, relaxing. What he's really doing all night is calling news stations, saying a very general description of, I guess, what he thinks that he looks like, trying to see if there are any missing children that look like him. Someone from the news station tells him that he may have better luck calling the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So he calls them. He pretends to be the cops And again, it's describing sort of what he looks like, asking if there are any missing kids that look like that. Finally, the woman on the phone says, oh, you know what? I think you may be talking about Nicholas. And he asks her to fax over a picture of Nicholas because obviously he wanted to see the picture of Nicholas to see if he could pull off, pretend to be him. He sees the picture of Nicholas and is like, perfect, I can pretend that I'm him. But the picture was in black and white. So what he didn't know is after he was pretending to be the cops and confirmed that he was Nicholas, he saw a colored picture, not black and white. And he was like, oh, because Nicholas has blonde hair and blue eyes and Frederick has brown hair and brown eyes. After he saw that he had blonde hair, he also bleached his hair. I guess he thought that that would work. And I guess it did, because he got a passport in Spain and was sent home and moved in with Carrie. So again, he had seen the whole family. Everyone was excited to see him except for Jason, the half-brother. He's getting all settled in, right? He's going to school, he's making friends, whatever. When Jason finally meets him, he gives him a weird look, and Frederick later says that when they made eye contact for the first time, he could tell that Jason didn't believe him, but it almost seemed like he was just playing along. In the eyes of the FBI, Frederick had said, well, now I'm going to start calling him Frederick because that's his name, but he's still pretending to be Nicholas. He had said that he had been in Spain. The FBI, like, you were apparently taken to be part of this scheme from Texas to Spain. If this is happening, we need to know. So November 4th, 1997, an FBI agent, her name is Nancy Fisher, talks to Nicholas Frederick. And immediately Nancy is suspicious because he didn't look like he was 16 at all. He had facial hair and his hair was bleach blonde, but his facial hair was really thick and really dark. But his hair on his head was blonde. Nancy's trying to get more information out of him and she's questioning him. Frederick tells Nancy that he was abducted by someone in the military. He was put in a van, flown overseas, and kept in a dark room with a bunch of kids. He went into detail of how they were mistreated, he said that they broke his hands with a baseball bat, that they fed him insects to eat, they were tortured, they broke his fingers, like all this detailed information about violent stuff that he went through. He said he was experimented on, specifically that these people, these men that were keeping these children, were experimenting with needles in their eyes. He said their goal was to change their identity because obviously they stole these kids. They don't want anyone to know who they are, so they would try and change their hair color. They would try and change their eye color. He said he one day just saw a door that was left open and ran away and escaped. That's when he said was the first time that he discovered that he was in Spain. Also, by the way, he was actually the one when the police got a call from a tourist couple that they found a kid that was lost and confused. Frederick was pretending to be a couple that found the boy, but he just wanted the police to come and find him. After this interview, the FBI agent Nancy said she was horrified. He was going into detail about torture that was done to children, and she said a normal person doesn't lie about details of this kind of torture. This person had either been a victim before or was a fantastic actor. She just wasn't sure which one. At this point in time, Frederick still thinks that he has convinced everyone because his whole family is loving him. They are taking care of him. They are pretending like he really is Nicholas. So he was like, I'm doing such a good job. I'm going to get away with this. Everything's going to be fine. Because of how crazy this story was, it was all over the news. A private investigator, Charlie Parker, got involved. A TV producer contacted Charlie, the investigator, because they wanted him to find Nicholas, because they wanted an interview with him. They go to meet Charlie. They met at a diner, and Charlie notices a picture behind the booth that they sat at of Nicholas's missing picture of when he was a kid, and then fake Nicholas is sitting in the booth across from him, so he can kind of see him and the flyer like right next to each other, and he's just looking at that. They look not like that. There's no way this is Nicholas. He looks nothing like the guy in the flyer, and also he has brown eyes and Nicholas has blue eyes. He also noticed that fake Nicholas was only speaking with a French accent. Charlie calls Nancy immediately, and Nancy couldn't really believe it. She starts thinking about it more in detail, and she's like, you know what? When he was saying all these stories about the torture and what he went through, he didn't give any details. He didn't say any names. He didn't say any dates. It was just a very general story of just him being tortured. So Nancy and Charlie are suspicious. Nancy decides that she needs to tell his family that she needs to take him to Texas Children's Hospital in Houston to deal with the trauma. When they get to the hospital, fake Nicholas starts talking to Dr. Bruce. Dr. Bruce notices red flags straight away because he couldn't speak English without an accent, a French accent. He says that children that were raised in a English-speaking household and they've grown up their entire life only knowing and hearing English, and then to not be able to speak it without an accent 9 to 10 years later is just not possible. He calls Nancy, the FBI agent, immediately. Nancy calls Carrie, the sister, tells her what the doctor says, and says he just confirmed that there's no way this could be Nicholas and there's no way that he could be American. This could be a very dangerous person. Do not be at the airport when we come back. When Nancy tells Carrie this, Carrie's like, oh my God, and she starts screaming. However, when they land from Houston, Carrie is at the airport and they're just pretending as if Nancy didn't just call and say that this wasn't Nicholas. Like, they literally hug him immediately and then take him home. Finally, Nancy decides, let's just get this over with. Let's take a DNA test. So she wants a DNA test between fake Nicholas and his mom. But when they asked the mom absolutely refused. She literally laid on the ground and was like, I'm not going to do it. You can't make me. I'm not getting up. I know that this is my son. I don't need proof, so I'm not giving you my DNA. I take notes for the cases, and the next line that I have written literally just says, what the f- is going on? So the FBI and the investigator are very suspicious, and by this point, Frederick himself is even confused because he's like, why is his family so sure that it's me? Like, the FBI is onto him, the investigator is onto him. Why is the family so convinced that this is me? It's not funny, but it kind of is. It's not. Then Frederick is now like, should I be scared? He thinks back specifically to when he first saw Carrie at the airport, and Carrie touched his nose and was like, I remember this nose. You look so much like Uncle Pat. And immediately she pulls out the photo album and is showing him pictures of the family. It almost felt like she was helping him study. So he starts thinking, is there a bigger lie? Like, he thought that he was lying to the family, but now this like weird tension of like, you know that I know and I know that you know. So he's spooked. He thinks that something else is going on, something bigger. Investigator Charlie starts peeling the layers back, trying to figure out what's going on. He looks into the police report from when Jason called and said that after Nicholas was missing, he saw Nicholas trying to break into the garage, but he sees on the report that there's no evidence that he was actually there. Like, nobody really saw him, only Jason. So he's thinking, why would Jason call and say that he saw him if he didn't really see him? Maybe because he wanted everyone to think that a missing person was still alive. But what if he wasn't? All the family members showed up at the airport when Nicholas was found except for Jason. And when he finally saw Jason, Jason was acting suspicious as if he knew that he wasn't really Nicholas, but he still just played along with it. Frederick starts thinking about that too. He's like, why are they so sure that it's me when they know that it's not me, when the FBI has literally told them that it's not me? So he thinks, and everyone sort of thinks, but no one talks about it, that Jason killed Nicholas, and this is why they are pretending that this guy could really be him, because that would mean that they would cover up the murder. They do end up getting the DNA, so March 3rd, 1998, after 5 months of Frederick pretending to be Nicholas, all cards are on the table, the lie is over. It's confirmed that he is actually a 23-year-old French man named Frederick Bourdin, and he's wanted by the police. He's wanted by the police because he is referred to as the chameleon. Apparently, stealing identities was his thing. He had stolen over 500 identities. This was also his third time assuming the identity of a missing child. It feels like he just wanted to be a child so bad, because all the identities that he tried to steal were children 13 to 16 years old when he was actually 23. So he weirdly had like almost like a fetish for trying to be a missing missing young kid. He obviously went to court, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but soon after he was released, he was back in France and he stole the identity of a 14-year-old missing French boy that had been missing since 1996. Keep in mind, this is after he has already gone to prison for this and he has been released. In 2004, he did it again in Spain. In 2005, he did it again, said that he was a Spanish orphan. In 2007, he actually got married and had 5 kids. 2017, he was divorced, and a year later, he stole someone's identity again. So he's just a mess and actually so creepy, because I don't even know what has to go in your brain to want to do that and put that much effort into doing that after you've already been to prison for it. But back to Nicholas's family. I mean, he was missing. He was never found. It's been over 30 years and no one was ever charged. And people suspected that Jason, his brother, was the one that did something to him and probably killed him. But 2 months after Frederick was arrested, Jason died of a overdose. So we'll never really know. This case seems like a movie. It's crazy. I was reading it and I just couldn't believe anything, and I want to know what you guys think. I don't get sick easily, but even I felt extremely ill listening to this, so if you want to listen to it, feel free, but don't say I didn't warn you. Austin, I believe you pronounce his last name Haroof, was a college frat student that committed a crime that honestly, I don't even know what word to use to describe. This was in Florida in 2016. Austin's dad was more of the strict parent. His mom was more chill. He had a younger sister named Haley. His parents got divorced when he was a teenager and him and Haley moved in with his mom. In middle school, he was your pretty average kid. He was a good student, got good grades, but he did get bullied a lot for his weight. In high school, he got really obsessed with his appearance and he got really into health and fitness and also joined the football team. After high school, he went to Florida State University. He joined a frat, Alpha Delta Phi. He studied exercise science. He was your typical college boy. He drank a lot, maybe too much. He would party a lot, always out on a regular basis. Yeah, not much to say. He was just having fun his freshman year. He met a girl who became his girlfriend, had a good group of friends, had a fun time. It was the summer after his freshman year of college where things started to go wrong. After his freshman year, he decided he wanted to sober up. He did not want to be anywhere near anything that may be harmful to his body. He was going to eat clean, work out, take care of himself, and be better, in his own words. That summer, he also got really into music and rapping. He wanted to become a famous rapper. He was very passionate about it and started referring to himself as Austy Frosty. He got a job working for his dad. His dad was a dentist, and his attitude while working there was questionable. He got way too involved in his clients' personal lives. He would ask them questions almost to the point where it would make them uncomfortable and would get really attached and really involved in their personal lives and their problems. Still in the summer of 2016, he went to Tampa to go visit his girlfriend, and after he returned from the visit is when his entire personality changed. His parents said he came back from that trip as an entirely different person. All of his viewpoints on anything and everything had changed. Austin said he was evolving into this different person who had found his mission and his passion for life, and that was going to be to help people. He said he would be remembered as this great figure who did incredible things. He was never going to be sad anymore, and he found his purpose, which is great, but it was the way that he would talk about these things that made them weird. He would text his girlfriend telling her about this new person that he was going to be, and he would say things such as, "I'm sorry you think I'm so strange now. I've been so weird these past few days. I don't think I'm going crazy, but I'm no longer afraid of anything." Little comments like that just made the whole thing sound off. This change of character progressed to the point where Austin started to believe that he was Jesus. He thought that he could bless water and make it holy. He started dressing like Jesus, and he even said that he was scared of the devil. He thought there were demons living around them everywhere, and he would see these dark figures and get really scared that they were going to kill him and or his family, and he was going to protect them from these scary demons. At the same time that he was believing that he was Jesus and he was scared of the devil, he was also believing that he was part human, part dog. Different days, he would think that he was part human, part horse. Yes, horse, like the animal. The way that his character and his personality was changing at such a rapid pace, to me, is a sign that he was struggling mentally. And his Google searches support that as well. He was Googling things such as, ways to overcome fear and anxiety, selling your soul to the devil, how to know if you are going crazy, I think I am going crazy, am I? And then he would research things such as schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, panic, and bipolar disorder. So obviously something very weird and confusing is going on inside of his brain, and by his Google searches, it's obvious that he was confused by that as well. On top of that, he wasn't sleeping. He was averaging 2 hours a night on a good night of sleep. August 13, he goes out to dinner with his father and his father's girlfriend, and his dad says that night he was acting very frazzled, very confused, and almost on edge, all over the place, anxious, switching from being in a great mood, thinking that he was this powerful guy, to then being really scared and terrified of everyone around him. August 14th, he goes to a weapons show with his dad. It's very obvious that he's scared of something, but we don't really know what he was scared of. He was asking the people that were selling weapons there about self-defense and how to protect himself, and he did end up buying a knife at that show. The next day, August 15th, 2016, is the day of the crime. I'm going to be talking about the day and what he did during that day. It's going to sound crazy. It's kind of all over the place, but I'm going to try and make it easy to follow. That morning, he went on a run, which in itself is not weird. However, he was in the mood where he thought he was part dog during his run, so he started running on all fours. In the afternoon, he goes to his dad's house to pick up his car that he had left there. His dad notices that he's acting really strange, so he doesn't want to give him his keys, but Austin just goes crazy. He jumps on top of the car and starts jumping up and down, creating a scene until his dad eventually does give him his keys. One of his fraternity brothers was having a party, so he stops by there that night. He doesn't want to drink because remember, he's taking good care of his body now, but he takes a beer and pours it all over him because he says that he has to feed his hand beer. Later on, he goes to dinner again with his dad. He is acting very weird and just runs out of the restaurant because he says that he feels trapped. He then ends up back at his mom's house, so where he lives, and mom is immediately concerned. He eventually ends up back outside and is just running around the streets. He's running around and he sees a dark figure that in his eyes is a demon, and he starts running around looking for help until he runs into the house of John and Michelle Stevens. John was 59. He owned a landscaping company, and Michelle was 53. She worked in finance. They were retired by this point. John and Michelle were described by their friends and family as very friendly, very kind, just genuinely nice people. Austin sees them sitting in the garage watching TV. The lights are on, so he runs over toward them. You have this 19-year-old boy screaming in a panic, very visibly unstable, running towards you. Obviously, that would cause anyone to freak out, so Michelle starts screaming because she doesn't know what's going on. Austin sees Michelle freaking out, and in his head, he now thinks that she is evil, and he's now scared of her. Austin pulls out the knife that he had bought at that show and starts stabbing both Michelle and John. He then grabs a machete from the garage and starts stabbing them further. While he's doing that, he finds a bottle of bleach in the garage, and he just takes that and starts chugging it. Next to Michelle and John lived a man named Jeff Fisher. He hears the commotion, so he walks outside and into the garage to see what's going on. Austin attacks him and is now stabbing him. Jeff is somehow luckily able to run away and get back into his house. He calls 911, lets them know that he has been stabbed in the head and in the back. He's bleeding profusely, and there's a guy stabbing a woman and a man inside of their garage. Around that same time, Austin's mom calls 911 and says that she is worried. She doesn't know where her son is, but she is scared of his safety because he had been acting weird. The police show up to Michelle and John's house, and if you're eating, brace yourselves for this. Maybe stop eating for a second. Austin is hovering on the ground over John's body. He's making animal noises. He's practically naked and still stabbing them. That's not the worst part. The worst part is that Austin is hovering over John, biting his face and eating it. The cops can hear the sound of flesh ripping because Austin is chewing off John's face and eating it. The cops could not get Austin off of John. They tried a taser, it wasn't working. They sent a police dog to get him off, it wasn't working. Eventually, I'm not sure how long it took, but it took 4 policemen and the dog to get Austin eventually off of John. Once he's in handcuffs, he says to the police, "Help me, I've eaten something bad." The cops say, "What did you eat?" And he just responded and said, "Humans." John and Michelle were pronounced at the scene. Luckily, the neighbor Jeff was okay. He had horrible injuries, but he did live. Austin was taken to the hospital because he had a lot of injuries. He did have human flesh in his teeth, but he also had cuts all over him. His tongue was cut open and had pretty bad internal injuries because he had chugged that bottle of bleach. When he was taken to the hospital, they thought that he was under the influence of something, but they tested him and there was nothing in his system. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with psychotic features. 2 months after that, he was charged with the murders of Michelle and John and the attempted murder of Jeff. Everyone around him was concerned for him because his character just changed completely and he was acting so strange. They did schedule him a therapy appointment, but that appointment was not scheduled until after the attack and it was obviously way too late. Austin remembers bits and pieces of the attack, but he pretty much blacked out and his mental state was just completely destroyed. The trial was delayed because of the pandemic, but the judge accepted a plea deal. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. There was an agreement between the prosecution and the defense for Austin to be sent to a secure mental hospital until doctors and a judge agreed that he was no longer dangerous. But the last update I could find was from last year. He's still in the facility for an indefinite period of time. I'm pretty sure he's still there and hopefully there's been some progress or something has been done. I don't know. I just can't imagine ending the lives of two people, eating their flesh, and then being able to repair your mental state to be normal again.
This true crime case will make your blood boil. Over a decade ago, 19-year-old Kara Nichols vanished. The teenager was born and raised in Colorado Springs and unfortunately had begun using substances throughout high school. She was reported missing on the 14th of October 2012. At this point, her roommates hadn't heard from her for 5 days. Police soon learned that she'd actually spoken to her brother on the phone on the 9th of October at around 11:45 p.m. She told him that she was on her way to a modelling shoot. The next day, unsettlingly, her phone was going straight to answer phone. It was actually her brother that ended up travelling to her apartment to figure out what was going on. He spoke to her roommates and the alarm was raised. Now, Kara's laptop was actually still at her apartment, which was concerning because if she just decided to up and left, she wouldn't have left her laptop behind. When investigators started digging into the case, they found that Kara had been placing ads as an S worker. Interestingly, she'd actually posted an ad with her phone number on it the same day she went missing. Police also found out that her phone had been used on that day too at almost midnight. Investigators started looking into exactly which numbers she'd received calls from and set about contacting the individuals. They got a return call of Joel Hollendorfer. He admitted to police that yes, he had spoke to the girl about S services, but they'd never ended up meeting. However, when police tracked Kara's phone, her last activity was in the area of Joel's parents' house. Police ended up searching at the property with a cadaver dog. Disturbingly, the dog barked in loads of different areas on the property to indicate remains. However, the owner of the property stated that this must be just because they have a lot of animals and over the years the animals die and then they bury them in the back garden. The police were happy with this explanation and gave up on the search. They also, though, decided to interview Joel's wife, who strangely declined to cooperate with the investigation. Frustratingly, Kara's case went cold. On February the 8th, 2022, a decade after she went missing, police confirmed that they had found Kara's body. It was on that property they'd searched the whole time. Joel was obviously arrested. In February 2022, his wife decided to come clean to police. She told them that Joel had told her in 2014 that he accidentally killed an escort that he'd hired. He admitted that he accidentally strangled her to death and buried her near a dead horse on the property. Joel's defence in court claimed that he accidentally killed her in an S-act gone wrong and that she lost consciousness due to substance use. Shockingly, he was only convicted of manslaughter and got just 24 years in prison. This was a huge blow to Kara's family.
The case of Brianna Maitland is one that just doesn't make sense. In 2004, she would be last seen leaving work at the Black Lantern Inn. She was just 17 years old. On the 19th of March 2004, she would sit her GED, which I'm guessing for UK viewers is similar to GCSEs. And to celebrate her sitting her GED, her and her mother went out for some lunch and then to run some errands. However, it was running these errands when at the checkout line in a store, her mother claimed that her demeanour shifted. Her mother said something outside caught Brianna's attention and she would go and check it out and then come back in shortly afterward. But her mother said that when she came back, something was off. However, Brianna said that she was fine. Brianna was said to be shaken, unnerved and agitated. But Brianna just said she needed to go home and prepare for her upcoming shift at work that evening. After completing her shift at work, she then left at 11:20 that evening. But she never made it home. The next day, March 20th, a police officer would be called to an abandoned house to investigate a strange happening. This house was about a mile away from Brianna's workplace, and what they found was Brianna's car backed up into this house. And inside the car were some of Brianna's belongings, like 2 of her uncashed-in paychecks. But at the time, the police officer didn't know that this car belonged to Brianna, and he just assumed it was abandoned by a drunk driver. And he took the vehicle to a local pound. But for some reason, Brianna wasn't reported missing for about 5 days. But it was on the 25th of March when her parents did report her missing, and they gave police officers photos of Brianna's car. And it was then the police officer that discovered the car backed up into the old house. It clicked in his head and he realised that this was the same car. Brianna's mother, Kelly, believes that she did not do this to her own car and that this car was planted by someone else. After the disappearance, then a bunch of witness statements came out about this car and what it was seen doing before its discovery. Between 11:30 and 12:30 a.m. the next morning, the car was seen with its headlights on. But this witness claimed that there was no one to be seen in or around the car. A second person claimed to see the car again at 12:30 in the morning, and they said that the indicator was flashing. Another witness again came forward and said they drove past the car at 4 a.m. and they said that they saw nobody in or around the car. And believe it or not, police were actually not convinced that foul play was involved. They assumed that Brianna was a runaway. However, in 2007, it was ruled that foul play was involved and that the car had been staged to look like that. Police had actually investigated this case. They'd received a lot of tips. One of these tips claiming that Brianna had been brutally murdered by 2 known drug dealers and that her body was dismembered and disposed of on a pig farm. Since their daughter's disappearance, Brianna's family has come out and said that they've received dozens of phone calls of people claiming that Brianna's body was tied to a tree and is at the bottom of a lake. However, in 2016, police were able to take DNA samples from Brianna's car that did come back with a match. However, they've not released any more information about that other than that. With the latest update coming in 2022, again regarding DNA, and police saying that they're pretty close to a breakthrough. But as of today, the case of Brianna Maitland remains unsolved.
You don't even have to watch this video, just listen, and if you know the name of the girl, comment down below, because I'm trying to work, but I can't get this out of my head, so I need someone to tell me because I cannot find it on the internet. So basically, my dad was telling us last week about this case in Mexico that it's a little girl, she tells her parents, oh, I'm gonna go swimming at my friend's house, like, I will come back later, blah, blah, blah. And parents are like, okay, go have fun. The neighbors, I guess, had like a little blow-up pool or something. So she goes, if I get any details wrong, that's very likely, which is why I need someone to tell me the name so I can Google it. She goes to go swimming at her friend's house. It's getting late. She hasn't been back, so the parents go over and they're like, hey, is our daughter here? It's getting dark. She needs to come back home. And the friend's mom answer the door, and she's like, oh no, like, we haven't seen her today. She hasn't been over here. Like, I'm sorry. And the parents start to get worried because then they're like, all right, where is she then? So I think the parents call the cops, and then there's like a camera at a store or something that shows like the house. So the cops are looking at it. I think this is what happened. And you see the little girl walking over, and she does make it inside the house, and she goes into the friend's house. Then you don't see her come back out, and then you see a taxi go to the friend's house. The parents get in the taxi, drive away with like a suitcase or trash bags or something. And so then I think the cops call like the taxi. They try and figure out what taxi driver it was. They find him, and the cops say, take us to wherever you dropped them off. So they do. And then they find like the trash bags or the suitcase or whatever it was. And the little girl's body is in there. So they killed her. So she lied, the mom. the parents were like, hey, have you seen our daughter? And the mom's like, no, we haven't seen her. And then it turns out they literally, like, something happened inside the house where they had to go dispose of her body, which is sick. And this is where it gets blurry. I think that then the dad of the little girl finds out and he goes over there and beats up the friend's dad, kills him, and it's just like a whole mess.
It was the 28th of October 2024 when police in New York made a horrific discovery. In a stunning luxury resort and spa in New York, a woman was found deceased. Now, the resort, it's reported online, is situated in 3 acres of lush Hamptons woodlands. It's even featured in Vogue magazine, and many celebrities have been guests there. It's definitely not a place that you associate with violence, let alone murder. The victim is 33-year-old Sabina Roasis. She's a talented artist and is originally from Brooklyn. The member of staff who found Sabina's body immediately alerted authorities. Police got to the scene at around 12:30 p.m. and what they could tell from what they found was that Sabina met a very violent end. Authorities believe that the attack was a violent one, and they say that she was targeted by somebody who knew her. They've described it as an isolated incident and a homicide investigation has been launched.